When Boris the bear lost his paw in a poacher's trap in the Siberian tundra, it looked like it was all over for him. But an imaginative vet and a blacksmith teamed up to save his life, crafting a replacement from old scythe blades. They grafted it to Boris's stump. And soon Boris was back to using his claw to open beehive and catch salmon from rivers. But now veterinary science has much better technology. Did you know 3D printing can save animals from crippling injuries that should kill them? Yes, this remarkable technology brings animals and humans together to save lives. Beauty, the bald eagle. This beautiful bald eagle had a terrible fate. She was shot in the face by a hunter when she was 6 years old. Her beak was completely destroyed, and she was left to face a terrible death, starving to death in the woods surrounded by food, the prey which she could no longer consume, thanks to her loss of beak. It was a terrible fate for a magnificent bird, which should be protected from such injustices and cruelty by the law. Thankfully, a couple of hikers found her in a terrible state, and the poor bird didn't resist when they helped her. She was just too weak, and they carefully wrapped her in a thermal blanket and gently carried her for a day till they reached a road where a forest ranger vehicle was able to stop and pick her up. Then she was immediately transferred to a wildlife rehabilitation center. Despite the advice of many experts telling them to euthanize Beauty, they saved her from inevitably starving to death. An expert engineer, both in 3D printing and a skilled vet, was on hand to save the day and Beauty. The charity Birds of Prey Northwest, medic Jane Cantwell knew something could be done. She teamed up with 3D printing engineers, wildlife experts, and a dentist to develop this SolidWorks nylon polymer beak. These experts knew what they were doing, but still there was a moment of deep unease and anticipation when a sedated, intricately crafted beak was attached to her face. It was made up of 6 perfectly crafted parts, and they fitted Beauty's face like a glove. Just a few days later, Beauty was in a fit state to be returned to nature, and this all happened a year ago. Beauty has since been spotted several times, soaring majestically through the sky, living her very best life as nature intended. Music. But plastics more often hurt animals than help them, but sometimes they can both hurt and help them. Take, for example, the story of Lola, the sea turtle. Lola lost her flipper a decade ago when she became severely entangled in a fishing line. She had been swimming slowly, getting weaker and weaker for maybe a couple of weeks when she had the good fortune to be spotted by some remarkable rescuers. Trainee Navy SEALs are getting ready to protect their country and rescue the needy. Their first rescue was fortunately poor Lola. These strong, brave men and women carried Lola to shore on a canoe. They quickly contacted a local animal rescue and, after swearing the rescuers to secrecy, handed Lola over. The flipper was unsalvageable and was removed in surgery. Lola's fate looked grim, either to be euthanized or to live out her limbs as a disabled sea turtle in an aquarium. But someone at the animal rescue had another idea and put out a request on a social media forum for 3D printing engineers. Surely somebody could print Lola another flipper. Thousands of miles away, students at Worcester Polytechnic Institute assisted with the development of a prosthetic flipper. They believed there was hope of helping her, and in the future, other injured sea turtles that might suffer similar injuries. In the future, using 3D printing, the students created the first ever hydrodynamic biomimetic flipper. Lola is now able to swim and feed normally and remains an ambassador for her species at the Key West Aquarium, Kemp's Ridley sea turtles, as one of the rarest sea turtles on the planet, and they are critically endangered. There are only about 1,000 nesting females remaining. The remarkable thing is that with 3D printing technology, the Worcester students never actually met Lola. They sent the specifications to the Key West Aquarium, which printed it out and attached it. It was a year later that the Worcester students were able to visit Lola in her new home. Lola may never return to her old home in the Pacific Ocean, so whilst this story may have a happy ending, it is important to remember to dispose of plastics and other wastes responsibly. Winter, the dolphin, is a bottlenose dolphin who was found stranded in a lagoon near Cape Canaveral, Florida. She was only a baby at 2 months of age. She had become wrapped in a crab trap line which cut off circulation to her tail flukes. This was a very hard start to life for what was a baby dolphin. The rescue team at Clearwater Marine Aquarium tried to heal her flukes with a range of innovative therapies. Blood transfusions and experimental medication, exercise in a harness in a tank, and Winter seemed to be trying everything possible to make this heroic innovation work. But despite their best efforts, the tissue could not be saved. The nerve damage and loss of blood were just too great. But Winter was young enough to adapt and learn to live with her limitations. She does quite well without the use of her flukes, swimming side to side like a shark. Perhaps in her stay at Clearview, she saw a shark swimming in a tank and had the wisdom to copy it. But this was not a long-term solution. This unnatural movement put stress on her spine. So someone in the team came up with a brilliant innovation. They put out a call to 3D printing engineers, and a team of experts came together to develop a silicone and plastic tail for her, with which she swims much more comfortably. The people at Clearwater truly believe that with a little help and time, she may one day be able to return to the ocean, and perhaps find her missing pod of dolphins, as dolphins are very sociable animals that will seek each other out. Clarabel the cow is something of an exception. She didn't get her body part replaced by 3D printing. She was outstanding in her field one day when she was savagely attacked by an out-of-control corgi called Vulcan, whose owner had irresponsibly let her run free. The creature leapt at Clarabel and attacked her exposed udder, tearing it off completely. Clarabel would have died at worst, and certainly never been able to produce milk again. Fortunately, an experimental genetics laboratory was able to use stem cells from Clarabel's ears to grow a replacement udder from these stem cells. The udder was grafted onto Clarabel in a 6-hour-long operation, but it was successful, opening up a possibility of growing replacement organs for humans and animals in the future. Mosha the elephant is a very sweet Asian elephant and is only 2 years old. Elephants are wise creatures with great sensitivity, which makes what happened to Mosha as an infant even more tragic. She was only 2 months old when she stepped on a landmine and completely destroyed her front leg. Mosha could not support her mighty weight of hundreds of pounds on just one leg. Just living in captivity would be quite a challenge for her to survive. But Mosha had friends, at first local park rangers who found her, then the local clinic where she was taken, and then thousands of donors around the world who contributed to her crowdfunding for her treatment. Mosha was just a baby, and it touched the hearts of so many who knew she deserved to live a full and happy life. Misha's saviors had a mission to give her a better life. Wildlife rehabilitators at Friends of the Asian Elephant created a prosthetic leg for her because animal prosthetics are a work in progress. This is now her 9th artificial leg. The legs themselves are a miracle of modern engineering. Mosha now weighs more than a ton, and the Asian jungle where she lives is a harsh environment for any technology. But her prosthetics survive. In fact, the only thing that can make them need to be changed is Mosha growing and thriving. Mosha is still just a baby, and elephants can live for almost a century in human years. So the one thing a prosthetic leg cannot do is to grow with her. Maybe there's some miracle plastic being worked on right now that will grow as the animal it is attached to grows too. Misha's legs stand as a stark warning to the dangers of landmines and how mankind must be responsible for their effects. Landmines are tragically common around the region due to decades of rebels fighting with the Myanmar government. It's not just elephants like Mona who suffer from them. Tragically, all sorts of foraging animals often suffer as a result, including Fred the tortoise. Fred the red-footed tortoise is actually a female. Named Fred by mistake, the volunteers have changed the name on her file to Frederica, but everyone still calls her Old Fred. Fred lost the majority of her shell in a forest fire. Not only did she lose her shell, but she also survived 2 bouts of pneumonia. Her faithful shell saved her from burning to death, but only just. And after 45 days refusing food due to the pain of her injuries and illness, it wasn't clear if Old Fred was going to make it. But Fred was made of tougher stuff, and lucky for her, a team was willing to put in the time and effort to nurse her back to health and to build her a new shell. No one had even thought to create a new prosthetic turtle shell before, never mind printing one. The elaborate shell was made from a corn-based plastic and was printed using a 3D printer, and it took over 50 hours for each piece to be printed. Then the team assembled the shell and painted it to look more realistic. Not that Fred would be able to turn her head around enough to see it, but having made such an effort to print it out and assemble it, they might as well finish the job. Also, it would mean that Fred would be able to fit in with everybody else in the jungle. Fred was able to return to the jungle for days at a time. Fred also enjoys an easier life with a dedicated caretaker who looks after Fred and helps clean and maintain his remarkable shell. Toucans are famous for their magnificent multicolored beaks. People around the world marvel and smile at them. Tragically, though, looking at these beautiful creatures isn't enough for everyone. Take Grecia, the toucan. Grecia had her beak hacked off by an unknown individual in Costa Rica. But Grecia had friends she didn't know about, and thankfully, compassionate locals brought her to a rescue center where dedicated workers nursed her back to health. But this was only a temporary measure, as she wouldn't survive without a functional beak. So doctors and 3D printing engineers developed a prosthetic beak that would help her live a more normal life. Her 2-part beak is made of nylon and was created with a 3D printer. The top portion was glued to her stump with epoxy, and the second part is attached with a pin to it, so she can practice using it to eat fruit and nuts. The team decided to attach the larger portion with a pin so it can be removed for cleaning. But being a toucan, they needed to find someone who was not a medic or an engineer, but rather an artist, to paint the beak in its famous rainbow colors, and they were inundated with offers for such an amazing and unique opportunity. Now she lives comfortably at Zoo Avenue, a private animal rescue center outside Costa Rica's capital. Although we think the Guinness Brewery in Dublin should hire this remarkable bird as a mascot. Trevor Billings, the sea turtle, is a 100-pound loggerhead, or as he's less formally known, Terminator turtle. He endured a collision that obliterated his whole lower jaw. But Trevor, or Terminator, was in luck because someone found him in distress and brought him to Sea Turtle Research Rescue and Rehabilitation Center in Dalian, Turkey. Knowing he wouldn't be able to fend for himself without the use of his jaw, the rescue team partnered with BTech Innovation, a company specializing in medical prosthetics, although usually only for human patients. Together, they were able to develop a 3D jaw for this tenacious turtle. So far, his body hasn't rejected the prosthesis. It's even possible that he will be returned to the ocean that he loves and lives in. Perhaps the most famous and cunning 3D printing job is artificial wild rhino horns. A new 3D printing technology is starting to rewrite the story of one of the world's most endangered creatures, the rhinoceros. Rhinoceros have been hunted to the very brink of extinction, not because they're a pest-eating valuable crops, not because local hunters value their meat or even their hide, but just for their unique horns that define their appearance. Some believers in traditional medicine believe these horns have almost magical capabilities. A little ground up and drunk in tea can cure impotence. Or vain rich people believe the ivory from their horns can be used to make furniture or even buttons. Ground-up rhino horn is no cure for any kind of illness, and there are synthetic alternatives to ivory for furniture. There is no good reason to hunt rhinos, and still they find themselves on the brink of extinction. For years, the only way to prevent rhinos being hunted for their horns has been to hire armed guards to protect them. This is expensive and obviously quite dangerous. There is, however, a more modern solution. the Pembean company has been able to reproduce the rhino horn, which is prized on the black market for its medicinal and cosmetic value, with a synthetic alternative. They are hoping to put rhino poachers out of business. Last year alone, 1,215 rhinos were poached, or one rhino every 8 hours. This is very alarming, and wildlife experts think the entire range of rhino species could be extinct in 5 to 10 years. Rhino horns are especially valuable in Asian countries where they are a status symbol and the horns are used in various traditional remedies. The horns sell for $30,000 a pound, more expensive than cocaine and even gold. Amazingly, the new technology recreates horns that are exactly like the real thing, indistinguishable in lab and genetic tests. The process to produce these miracle horns uses the same carrots and proteins, inorganic metal minerals, and actual rhino DNA to achieve the results. By flooding the market with these fake horns, they hope to make poaching rhinos both profitless and pointless. It's a great alternative to an earlier plan to simply capture wild rhinos, then under sedation cut their horns off and dispose of them, which, whilst making the rhinos of no interest to poachers, seem to upset the poor creatures. Of course, some wildlife experts are skeptical about the replicated horns, thinking that it will only make it harder to catch the poachers who are selling the real horns illegally. The horns are so valuable that poachers in developing countries can feed their family for a year after selling just one, which means that distributing the faux horns into the end-user market might not stop the slaughter. It may even make the market bigger and buying rhino ivory more respectable. It's a dangerous experiment, but if it saves an endangered species, perhaps it's worth it. Pembeant founders are hoping that if they instead sell the manufactured horns, which cost just 1/10 of the price to reproduce in the lab, to would-be poachers, then they can help them still make a profit and save the rhinos and their precious snouts that people fantasize about. It may even encourage people seeking to use them for aphrodisiacs to just buy some Viagra. This solution could even help a completely different species. As elephants have been similarly endangered by poachers seeking their beautiful tusks, elephant ivory tusks are a finer and more delicate and beautiful material than rhino horn. But it may just be a process of refining the mixture to make lab-grown elephant tusks. Of course, most conservationists agree the easiest solution would be for people to stop poaching these beautiful creatures. There are many animals we haven't covered in this video. Expensive koi carp with synthetic replacement fins that let them swim, a great white shark with new teeth, false teeth so to speak, and even a company making plastic rattles for rattlesnakes. But in most of these cases, the third-printed prosthetics are just replacing limbs and jaws damaged by mankind, whether it be through pollution, littering, or hunting. 3D prosthetics may just help heal the damage human beings have done, and people should work to make a safer world for all of its creatures. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and share. Join us for another Wonderbot video and be kind to the natural world around you.